We are no longer going to tolerate people on our streets. I'm not going to tolerate it as a father, and I'm not going to tolerate it as the mayor.
So, big changes are coming to San Francisco, and that is going to be terrible news for the homeless industrial complex, which for years has gotten rich off the backs of the less fortunate, using them as an excuse to get endless public money without solving any of the crises they exist to fix. But now the mayor of a city synonymous with this issue wants to do something about it, which is going to involve doing the one thing that might actually help those in need.
A major homeless shelter in the heart of San Francisco will soon close its doors, but advocates warn the timing could make an already strained system worse. Closure is part of a larger trend with 2 other sites that recently shuttered. The city is on track to lose more than 450 shelter beds citywide.
Now, why do they come here? Why not go to Des Moines or someplace like that? Because the city of San Francisco and the state of California gives them money.
There's a body business where they bring homeless people to the city to make the money off them. They're from all over the country. They're brought here because this is the epicenter where they're making all the money.
New city data shows some parts of San Francisco are seeing a sharp drop in tent encampments. Mission saw a 17% drop since June. In the Tenderloin, it's down 67%.
The street conditions in San Francisco have improved all over. We still have a lot of work to do. We've just seen improvement that we haven't seen in years.
Back at Nasser's store, she says sales are down at least 30% in recent months.
Set up shop here, and I don't want to have to keep calling SFPD and saying, hey, I need help. You need to clean up the area.
Look at this. Certain cities in California are at an absolute breaking point. This is insane. But these crackdowns on RV encampments and the closing of unproductive homeless shelters, that is going to put cities like Los Angeles and also New York on notice, because it's going to do something. Something which the ever-growing homeless industrial complex will not be too fond of. At the exact same time, with San Francisco now making an effort to clear its sidewalks of encampments, this is also going to bring about changes cities like Los Angeles, which don't do this, aren't going to see, while they march down the path of an irreversible outcome that may change their cities forever. But at the exact same time, we're still talking about California. I mean, this is a sanctuary state. We've got cities that think the best way to help someone is to let them live on the streets without actually helping them. And what that means, sadly, is that if there is a ban on encampments over here and there's not over here, guess where people are gonna go? A conundrum that recently popped up when RVs were banned in Northern California, forcing those who choose to live off the grid without knowing there's a better option to move south. And now locals are sounding the alarm, saying that this, in fact, could cause another migration of encampments as well, as those resistant to outcome-based assistance programs sadly walk a path that leads them away from a better future. And here's why this is a massive problem for the status quo in California. That status quo, as we've been learning all year, exists on fraud and on spending the public's money on things that don't necessarily benefit anybody except the people who get the money and the politicians who support these programs. And once people start to see real results that cost them less, there could be a tide that turns in California in a way the powers that be never expected. Because as people get the help they need and businesses bounce back and the affordability crisis in these places declines, the whole reason for stealing from the populace of California is gonna go away too. And we've also been able to pinpoint on video the very moment the mayor of San Francisco realized something had to be done.
I want to show you that. You can see the mayor's security detail already locked in a struggle with a man. The mayor close by, you can see him walking away. The man eventually taking the officer to the ground and then tries to get on top of him.
So if the bodyguards of the mayor, who is the top local official in a city, are not safe, are you safe? Am I safe? Is anybody safe walking on the street? No. This is a big problem. Something's got to be done. And now the mayor sounds a lot different than the socialists we've been hearing from about this crisis for decades.
We are no longer going to tolerate people on our streets. I'm not going to tolerate it as a father, and I'm not going to tolerate it as the mayor.
That's wild to hear a statement like that from a mayor in a deep blue area of the country like San Francisco that has been synonymous with the problems that are cropping up over there. And now Los Angeles is also on notice. Listen to this.
This is where Mayor Vass lives. You notice something? Or here, where Nithya Raman's $3 million mansion sits. They don't have to live in the mess they've created where you live.
So that's Spencer Pratt. He's running for mayor of Los Angeles. He sounds a lot different than the current mayor they've got over there, and some people think he's got a real chance of winning. But the scary thing about this for the status quo is that it's being exposed as being a scam. This started with interviews done by journalists like Nick Shirley, who went out there and exposed what a scam this was, and now people are starting to realize, gee, I'm living with an unaffordability crisis in my own household, and I'm spending all this money. There's people on the streets. They're not getting any help. Where's it all going? People are starting to wonder where the money's going. Why aren't there any results when we're all going broke here, being told year after year that we got to do more, that we're not doing our fair share? That's what the status quo is telling people, and they're sick of it.
We didn't get into this position overnight. It took us like a decade for San Francisco to literally slide to rock bottom, which we hit in 2024.
Wow.
Right? And so there's really kind of nowhere to go from there but up. And we can't forget the billions of dollars that the city wasted on flawed ideology, on radical harm reduction.
Right. So the city has been declining and spending armloads, truckloads of money on stuff that does not work. And people are like, why? And one of the scams that we're talking about here, these radical initiatives, as they're called, is this idea of a housing first model for tackling homelessness. And the way that this works is it says that before you look at the underlying reasons for why someone might be homeless, you need to get them a permanent place to live. So what happens? This public grift springs up where politicians dole out money to build homes for people who are unable to live in those for a variety of reasons. And that's very sad. But this disastrous progressive idea results in lots of money going to waste and nobody getting off the streets. But that's about to change. Watch this.
But advocates warn the timing could make an already strained system worse. The closure is part of a larger trend with 2 other sites that recently shuttered. The city is on track to lose more than 450 shelter beds citywide. Jennifer Friedenbach is with the Coalition on Homelessness.
It's really unprecedented. This is now the 3rd building in this administration that is being shut down solely because of neighbor complaints.
Well, why are they complaining if it's helping?
At the same time, San Francisco Mayor Daniel Lurie is bringing in new leadership to reshape the system. Mike Levine, a healthcare policy expert from Massachusetts, has been tapped to lead the city's homelessness department.
The key metric, no matter whether you're looking at our prevention efforts, you're looking at our shelter efforts, or you're looking at some of the housing work that the department leads, is whether or not we are quickly and sustainably moving people into a stable and independent environment.
So what that means is the local government has figured out that these shelters are not part of a system that moves people from the streets into a stable, independent environment, which is the whole reason these places exist. If a place exists and there's stuff going on there that is not helping this process along, what is the point of having it? Who is it actually helping? Nobody. And now, for the first time in a deep blue stronghold, success will now be measured through visible outcomes, not through dollars spent or homes built that nobody's actually gonna live in. Which means people are gonna start asking the question, are the number of tents and encampments and RVs on the streets growing or decreasing? Are people getting off the streets and staying off the streets, or are they being randomly put into some sort of housing first dwelling, which they then vanish from for some reason? Now, a big part of this was a presidential action a little less than a year ago on ending crime and disorder on America's streets. And this was the executive order touted by the Trump administration that said, look, we're gonna defund the homeless industrial complex. Once that started happening, the money for all these programs, which was all of America's money, which was being fraudulently spent on stuff that doesn't work, well, that dried up. And that has forced the hand of some of these city leaders to take another look at a system that's never been working. And it's good that they're doing it. It's just sad that it might have taken this long because the local governments in these places benefit from this.
Sadness should not be happening in the United States.
No.
All right? And it's happening because of one major reason. People don't care about these people.
I know, it's terrible. They don't care.
Right? So every indignation you could possibly imagine happens right out here in full view. So
this is key, because what do we hear from people that are part of the complex that benefits from American money to solve problems like what you see here that just seem to get worse? We hear that anybody who doesn't want to fund them is heartless. But really, it's this complex that gets public money and uses it on itself for stuff that doesn't work while paying massive bloated salaries to people who don't actually accomplish anything. They're the ones that don't care. There's an entire industry here which benefits from the presence of permanent encampments and people in need. That's why there are reports of people actually being imported, as we've heard.
You know, most of these people, which is what I hear the most from law enforcement, are not from Los Angeles. They have been flown in, bussed in, back to the business. There's a body business where they bring homeless people to the city to make the money off them. They're from all over the country. They're brought here because this is the epicenter where they're making all the money.
But think of how you or I would deal with a situation where a relative, a loved one, or a friend of ours ended up living on the streets. Would we do what these organizations that are funded by the public do? Absolutely not. No, we would go out there and we wouldn't do housing first. We would take this person and we would say, look, we got to get you some help. We got to get you fed. We got to get you on the right track. And we would work with that person to stage an intervention in their life and get them what they need to begin living independently once again. We would not allow them to live on the streets. We would ban their ability to camp out on the streets, thinking that that's the best option for them, because it's not. And they may not know or be aware that better options exist. We have to convince them of that because they've got some real problems that nobody's helping them deal with.
Progressives don't want to do that, and they dominate the state. They want to let you do whatever you want to do, no matter how much damage you cause.
Right, it's terrible. It's terrible.
So, this is happening for two reasons. Progressive virtue signaling. They, I guess, think that they're doing these people a favor, letting them destroy themselves. I guess. All right? And the second reason is their personal behavior. These people have said, hey, blank you, I'm going to do whatever I want. I don't care.
There's no accountability. And you've got people looking at a situation where you have people who aren't being held accountable for lawless behavior, in some cases, which puts other people in danger. And they say, yeah, by not holding them accountable, we're actually helping them. It makes us feel better about ourselves because, you know, these people are victims and we need to protect victims no matter what. There is no personal responsibility that we expect from people at all, in any way. That is not the attitude that you or I would have for a friend or a loved one. That is not the attitude we would have. If we knew that somebody was living like this, we would behave very differently. But state doesn't do that, and this has grown to a level that is breaking some areas of California down. And while every American is outraged by the idea of one losing their personal freedom, nobody has the personal freedom to break the law or to put other people's lives in danger. And the real way to fix a crisis like this is you've got to have a component that helps people, while at the exact same time there has to be a consequence for behavior that hurts the general public in some way.
Because most of the people here in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, they want to be here. They want this. And they are dangerous, not only to other people, but to themselves. It's just incomprehensible that the United States...
So the reason it's incomprehensible is because there's this idea in certain parts of America that law enforcement itself is the problem. But law enforcement's a good thing. If you enforce laws and you bring a consequence to bear on activity that is dangerous or is bad for society, that consequence will dissuade people from engaging in that type of behavior. It will help convince them that it is time to look around for another option. And that's what we want. We want that. We don't have to be harsh. with folks, but there should be some level of accountability here, because if there's not, how do you stop something like this from growing out of control as it has? We see this in pretty much every city that looks at behavior which is against the law, even if it's something as nonviolent as living on the streets or in the subway. We see this in New York all the time. If you're gonna let this kind of thing happen, it just leads to greater degrees of lawlessness, because it tells a person that there's no consequence for behavior that is not supposed to be happening. At the same time, if someone's engaging in behavior that is detrimental in any way, they need assistance. Someone needs to reach out. Someone needs to help them stop doing that. But that's not happening. So in New York, for example, we just let this go. We let people live on the subways. We let people live in the streets. We just elected a mayor who says they don't want to do any more homeless encampment sweeps. What's that going to signal to folks that don't know there's a better option? Certainly not going to help them. Regardless, we've got a desperate situation on the streets in certain places like San Francisco. It's good to see this idea of accountability finally coming into the picture, because unaccountability has allowed endless amounts of public money to be spent on stuff that doesn't work, which has just enriched the well-connected and the powerful and the politicians behind all of this stuff, while giving them a visual that they can point to on the streets that just says, hey, we need endless amounts of your money. We need more of your money. When really that visual, as it is now being looked at, should be seen as failure on the part of people who promote all of these kinds of programs, because this is not how all of America looks. There are certain parts of America that do not have encampments on the streets, and now people are starting to wonder why that is. These are also parts of the country where less money is spent on the homeless industrial complex, if you want to call it that. What do you think about this? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.